Dear all, good day. This is my 50th lecture under my banner of Marine Quiz Solutions. Today's subject matter under lecture number 50 is regarding the importance of hydrodynamics in ship handling part 2. I had already broadcast part 1 in my 49th lecture. Today, as we proceed, we are going to talk about, with respect to rule number 13, especially in an overtaking situation, how does the hydrodynamical forces and hydrodynamical interactions they affect the ship, especially when they are in the narrow channel and in a kind of a constricted or restricted waterways. To try to explain this thing in a much more perhaps elaborative manner, I've taken two, not extreme size, but different sizes of ship. There's one ship which is VLCC. She is laden, proceeding towards in the narrow channel, and this is north upstream and south downstream, so she is proceeding up north. There's another vessel which is a mid-sized tanker, which is also proceeding up north, and what we see is this, just to have a contrast of two different sizes of vessels. That's the reason I've taken a VLCC and a mid-sized tanker. Now, to go from a chronological order, we'll go slide by slide to make us understand what actually is happening, especially in an overtaking situation when a mid-sized tanker, which is also partially laden, or let's say laden, is trying to overtake a laden, fully laden VLCC. What actually is happening, we will see when we go down the slides. First, let's try to understand the whole thing from the nomenclature point of view. That, of course, this is a VLCC. She has got a course over ground. I have taken course over ground to basically try to understand how the vessels are behaving. That's the reason I've not taken the gyro heading. So the course over ground for a VLCC is 000 degrees true and speed 10 knots. The course over ground of a mid-sized tanker is 002 degrees true and speed 15 knots. Now, this, as I said earlier, this is an overtaking situation by rule number 13 in a narrow channel. And as I already had spoken earlier, that this is north upstream and this is south downstream. So the river is flowing from north to south, and the vessels are proceeding up north towards their destination. Slide number 2, we see that first and foremost, the slide number 1, we see that the distance between the VLCC and the mid-sized tanker is more than one ship's length. Now, when I'm trying to stress upon this point, what I'm trying to reflect upon that, of course, in a narrow channel fairway, we do not have sufficient sea room. But as far as practicable, when you have a different sizes of vessels and the overtaking situation takes place, it is recommended and advisable to keep at least one ship's length distance of a big vessel. That is, if the VLCC, which has got a LOA of 330 odd meters, and a midship sized tanker has got 183 odd meters, then at least 350 or 360 meters of clearance shall be maintained to reduce the effect of hydrodynamics and the suction effect. When I say suction effect, why the suction effect is basically getting so pronounced is because the VLCC is, when she's fully laden, she has got a very high quantum of underwater volume of displacement because of her size, draft, depth, and the displacement. And here I'm trying to talk about in contrast with the underwater volume of displacement. Whereas the midship-sized tanker, she is small, 183 meters long, laden. She has got a smaller underwater volume of displacement. So it is recommended and it is advisable by the thumb rule to maintain at least one ship's length away from the bigger vessel whenever you are in an overtaking situation. If not, then we see what is happening. So, overtaking situation, rule number 13, narrow channel, and this is how it is. the course over ground of a VLCC is 000 10 knots, and for a mid-sized tanker 002 15 knots. Slide number 2, what we see. The course for a VLCC, she's steady. Of course, we know why bow waves are positive and stern waves are negative is because, again, this I've reflected, also explained this at length in my, YouTube lectures as well, why they are positive, bow waves are positive and stern waves are negative. So right now I'm going to stick to the subject matter of the hydrodynamics interaction in an overtaking situation. So now, due to the bigger underwater volume of displacement of the VLCC, which is still steering 000 degrees true course in 10 knots, the mid-sized tanker vessel is experiencing a lateral drag towards the VLCC due to the suction effect. Now here we see that the distance with respect to the previous slide, what I'd shown, the distance is more than one ship's length of a VLCC. The distance here between the VLCC and the mid-sized tanker is reducing gradually, and because of that, the effect of suction, or the suction effect hydrodynamically, is enhancing. Why? Because the underwater volume of displacement of the VLCC is much bigger with respect to the mid-sized tanker. So, because when the vessel is moving, she's displacing that much water. Now, the gradient between the VLCC and mid-sized tanker is very big. So, there is a big gradient, because of which the suction effect is taking place, and the mid-sized tanker is eventually getting dragged towards the VLCC, which we'll see in our next slide how it is happening. So, now slide number 3. It's same course and speed for a VLCC, but we see course over ground of the mid-sized tanker is approximately, say, 355 degrees true. Why? Because what is happening, because of the suction effect, the mid-sized tanker is getting laterally drawn towards the VLCC because of her bigger underwater volume of displacement. Therefore, culminating, or in result, it is having a suction effect, because of which the mid-sized tanker is getting dragged towards the VLCC. So the lateral drag due to the suction effect, what I just mentioned, and experiencing sluggish steering, yaw, and hunting of gyro due to the suction effect. So what will happen that, the mid-sized tanker is doing 50 knots. The VLCC is steady on 10 knots. But what is happening? The water which is going to displace, the underwater volume of displacement of a VLCC is constant. Constant means because she is on a constant speed and her displacement is also constant. However, the mid-sized tanker, her speed is more than the VLCC because she is overtaking her. Basis which what is happening is that the water, or the vacuum, or the underwater volume of displacement, or if I call it void, is not getting sufficient time to get it filled up or to get it replenished. Because of this, there is an enhancement as far as the suction effect is concerned between both the vessels as far as the hydrodynamical interactions are concerned. So I'll repeat this thing again, that lateral drag due to the suction effect and experiencing sluggish steering and yaw and hunting of gyro due to the suction effect. The hunting of gyro may also be experienced when you're in the very close proximity, or you're coming into the wider effect of suction effect of a VLCC. Next slide number 4. Now, because of this, now with respect to the previous slide, she's still further away. Now she's almost come beyond the, past the quarter of a VLCC, that is the mid-sized tanker. Now see what is happening. The Venturi effect is taking place. One is the suction, second is the Venturi effect because of the constriction between both the vessels. The constriction which is taking place because they are coming closer. The mid-sized tanker is getting drawn towards the VLCC. So, Venturi effect, the velocity of the fluid, as we know by the definition of it, what it is, the velocity of the fluid passing through a constricted area will increase with decrease in pressure. So the velocity of the water which is passing in this constricted area has increased with the reduction in the pressure. Why? Because of the suction effect. Why? Because the underwater volume of displacement of a VLCC is bigger quantum, which is not getting replenished as far as it should have been in an open sea condition. And that is the reason why this Venturi effect and the suction effect is predominant as far as in a narrow channel or a restricted water is concerned. And that's the reason, and because of that, because of the suction effect, one is the squat is there, 2 CBV square by 100, that is 2 CBV square by 100 in a restricted waters, but it gets more pronounced because of the block under which both the vessels are, traversing. And because of that, because of this particular effect, the squat also increases. One is because of the speed, second is because the water which is not getting replenished as far as the underwater volume of displacement is concerned. So there may be increase in the squat experienced by both the vessels. And remember, it is directly proportional to more the speed, like in case of the mid-sized tanker, the speed is more 15 knots. More the speed, more the effect, especially when you are in the close proximity of a bigger vessel. In this case, the mid-sized tanker is in closest proximity of a VLCC when the distance is less than one ship's length of a VLCC, which I had also discussed in my previous session. So I repeat myself, Venturi effect, velocity of the fluid passing through a constricted area will increase with decrease in pressure. The course over ground of a VLCC is still constant, but the course over ground of a mid-sized tanker, she's wobbling port starboard, yawing port starboard, and there will be also a surge. There will also be a surging effect. So what I discussed earlier, same thing has been written over here. The higher the speed, more the yaw and more the surge, respectively. And the suction effect from VLCC is dependent upon the width of the channel and the speed of both the vessels, because if the width of the channel is further constricted, the effect will be more pronounced, exponentially. So we come to the next slide now. In this case, the mid-sized tanker is almost like, her bow or the pivot axis has already crossed, almost the quarter of the stern of the VLCC, almost coming to the midship length of a VLCC. And because of that, still she is wobbling. She is still making a course over ground of 355. Before it was 003. So she will be basically, you'll be experiencing the wobbling of the vessel, and that's where one has to be cautious and to exercise due diligence and prudence towards the safety of navigation as we speak. So the constricted water with a high velocity and low pressure plus suction effect due to the difference in the underwater volume of displacement. Now, the mantra is the difference in the underwater volume of displacement, because of which the whole thing is taking place, because the underwater volume of displacement of a VLCC is very big compared to the mid-sized tanker, and that is the reason the water, which is because she's also moving forward, and as per the Archimedes principle, she has to displace the equal amount of water what she's with respect to her displacement or weight, but that water is not getting displaced so fast because of the restricted waters. Number two, the VLCC is drawing more, so underwater volume of the displacement is playing a major role in this particular case. And the effect is getting pronounced by and large. One is the drag or the suction effect, which is being experienced by the mid-sized tanker, and number two, yaw surge, and number three, the squat effect will also be there. Here I'm just talking about the lateral drag towards the VLCC. With the purview of this particular session, since the time is limited, so I will talk about in next session once I'm given the podium. However, here we are talking about how the mid-sized tanker is getting dragged towards the bigger vessel. So the constricted waters with the high velocity and low pressure plus suction effect due to difference in the underwater volume of displacement, and that's the reason the course over ground of the mid-sized tanker is wobbling from 003 to 355. Could be anything. This is just a figure I've given just to basically excuse me, demonstrate and depict that what sort of effect, how does the hydrodynamical effect in a restricted water in this kind of proximity is basically a game changer if we are not exercising due diligence and exercising prudence towards the safety of navigation. Now, greater the speed, more the time it takes to fill the void. Void, when I'm saying, is the underwater volume of displacement, especially in restricted waters, and enhances the effect of squat on both the vessels reciprocatively. Now, going to the next slide. Now, again, in the overtaking situation, this mid-sized tanker is already proceeding ahead because he's doing 15 knots. Course over ground of VLCC is still 10 knots. And the constriction or suction effect increases due to close proximity of the both the vessels. As we see this with the green line, what I've shown or depicted here, the low pressure and high velocity of water which is passing through between both the vessels, and that's where one has to be very careful. This is a kind of a bit quite a bit of dangerous situation. So the thing what I'm trying to put forward is that, whenever an overtaking is taking place in a restricted waterways, how does the hydrodynamical effect is taking place? Of course, with the bow and stern waves, how they are behaving, and end of the day, because of so many restriction and the bigger vessel drawing more draft and underwater volume of displacement, of course, with respect to a displacement, how the suction effect is taking place on a smaller vessel. So let's go to the next slide when the overtaking is, it's underway. So in this case, again, the suction and the venturi effect is taking place. Again, here the pressure is high, but here the velocity increases as the constriction takes place. And because of that, the buffer reduces because the pressure is reducing. If we take it as a pipeline, if I draw this as a pipeline, the velocity of the water passing between both the vessels in this sort of situation has increased with reduction in the pressure because of the venturi effect. So overtaking situation, okay, that is what we are, and suction venturi effect is taking place. At this point in time, her course over ground is 008. Now, this is what I have just depicted based upon, what I have experienced myself in a narrow channel fairway. How does it basically, interact? How does the vessels interact? Of course, I never went so close, definitely not. Nevertheless, this was my, thought process to put it forward to all the mariners, if it could be of some assistance to them. The course over ground I have just, at random put at 008, could be 005, 006, 003, 004, it could be anything because it is happening at different stages. And it is happening, synchronously. Many a times we do not realize because it's like when we go to a doctor, first thing he looks for the symptoms before he comes to the ratification of the disease. So these are the kind of symptoms that when we know that, of course, one is a visual thing what we see, but when we see all these things, either vibration, hunting of gyro, or sudden, staggering, or a kind of galloping effect or a surge, we know that there is something which is not right, especially in this kind of situation. And of course, none of us would want to be ever in this sort of situation where it's too close, maybe a near miss. Coming to the next slide. Now, in this case, this vessel has already, passed up to, she's come up to approximate pivot axis of the VLCC. That's where, because she has got more speed, but still, the bigger vessel, because of the suction effect, you may experience. Let's say hypothetically, if your speed is constant, 50 knots, that is the speed over ground, taking this hypothesis, you will experience the reduction in speed because of the suction effect of the VLCC, which is affecting the maneuverability of the mid-sized tanker. So that is the reason I've written here, drag on the mid-sized vessel, followed by reduction of speed and maybe perhaps the vibrations. Or you may find your tachometer on the engine room side is also like hunting a bit. Why? Because the bigger ship is still drawing the same draft and her underwater volume of displacement is bigger. And now the mid-sized tanker is approximately here. She is trying to go pull ahead, go forward to get away from the suction effect of the VLCC. But it will still remain till such time the mid-sized tanker is approximately or more than one ship's length away from the VLCC. The effect will still prevail even after once you're more than one ship's length. That's the minimum criteria. Even when you're more than one ship's length away from the VLCC, the effect will still prevail, but it will be reduced drastically to such an extent that you may not experience, all these effects once you're more than one ship's length of a bigger vessel, in this case, the VLCC. During this overtaking process, the VLCC will also experience vibration as well as effect of squat, which I narrated earlier, due to canal width and the depth of the water, which we talked about how it may affect the squat of the VLCC also, because restricted waterways and the constriction is taking place. And in a small block, if I take this as a small block, this particular area, that is what I'm trying to show with my pointer, in this small block there is a big restriction because the water is not getting sufficient time to fill up the void, especially of a VLCC and thereafter the mid-sized tanker. Because remember, hypothetically speaking, which I've explained in my previous lectures as well, if I pick up this VLCC and keep it on the table, hypothetically, when the water, everything has stopped, and when I pick up this vessel, we'll see a void, a hollow, which is nothing but underwater volume of displacement, which is bigger. And at this point in time, the VLCC, during the whole process of this overtaking, has got a bigger void. Till such time, the void of a VLCC is getting filled up and it is more or less equal to the void or underwater volume of displacement of a mid-sized tanker. This effect will be experienced by the smaller vessel or a mid-sized vessel. But remember, in this particular case, they are not static, they are dynamic. So this is happening concurrently, synchronously, in such a manner that many times we do not realize that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have tried to basically, explain the subject matter effect, that how does the hydrodynamical effect gets more pronounced in a restricted waterways. Now, just to show you a simulation, let me run the slide from the beginning. This is the place where it is more than one ship's length, and then see how it is happening, how the ships are behaving till such time she is finally passed and clear. Thank you all for giving me this podium, and thank you very much. I hope it would have been of some help to the mariners. Thank you. Good day. Bye-bye.